Yes, we have apologies from Beth Allender, Co-op Tea.
Okay, great. Fine, thank you. Are there any disclosures? And if there are, Michelle will email out the template for completion. Okay, if you get back to us. The next thing we have are the minutes of the previous meeting. And are there any matters arising from that, or either can I take them as a true record? Yeah, Sandra, fine. Great. Okay, fine. Thank you on that. And then we have letters, and any comments you want to make about the letter that we sent to our visit following our visit to Bishop Gore, and in the pipeline will be the letter following our visit to Dylan Thomas, but that'll be at a future meeting. So any comments? Obviously not. That's great. Thank you very much. We have public question time. No public questions have been received. So we move on very, very quickly to item number 7, and that is additional learning needs reform update. And can I welcome Councillor Robert Smith, our cabinet member. I hope he's feeling a little better. I heard you were not too well yesterday. And Helen Morgan-Rees, Director of Education, Kate Phillips, Head of Vulnerable Learner Service, Hugh Bynan, ALN, and Fraser Newbury, ALN. So great. Who wants to sort of kick off?
I'm happy to start to go through the report.
Great,
that's
thank
okay
you.
With Councillor Smith and Director.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
that's fine. Yes.
Thank you. I'll talk through the report, and then Hugh will pick up on some of the key elements. Unfortunately, Fraser's not with us because he's poorly today. So we'll go through it together. So the report just initially provides some background around the legal framework in relation to additional learning needs and Education Tribunal Act 2018 and the responsibilities that it places on the local authority. In essence, the Act aims to improve the planning and delivery of support for learners from 0 to 25 who have additional learning needs by adopting a more person-centred approach to planning and delivery of support to meet the needs of children and young people. So in order to help us achieve this, we have an ALN strategy developed for Swansea to outline the transformational programme that was required to implement the ALNet Act successfully. And that initially took place between 2019 and 2022, and it was developed with our key strategic partners and overseen by our ALN Strategic Board. And the board membership includes head teachers, counsellors, colleagues from further education institutes, local health board, our DECLO, who's the designated clinical lead officer in the local health board, social services, and also the early years sector. That strategy is now complete. So we're moving towards a new strategy around full implementation and embedding of the reform. So our current strategy covers the period from 2022 to 2027. And we've identified 4 priority areas. So they are schools, post-16, collaboration and early years. And again, as detailed above, the strategy is overseen by our ALN Strategic Board. But just to note, in addition to that, we've got 2 key elements that are also part of Swansea Council's transformational programmes. And specifically, they are transforming additional learning needs, which builds on our strategy and focuses on implementation, but also supporting sufficient specialist places, which is a transformational programme designed to meet the current and future demand as a result of ALN reform and legislation. So as well as the oversight with our ALN strategic board, we also report quarterly to Swansea Council's transformational board, and we also present an annual report to Cabinet. So hopefully that will give you an idea of the strategic oversight. And in order to provide an update to this panel on the progress, what we've done is we've broken it down into the 4 areas of the strategy, but part of those areas will describe some of the activity that takes place under the transformation programmes as well. So I'll start with schools, which is not surprisingly one of the largest elements of the strategy. To give you an overview, the transformational project supporting sufficient specialist places is really critical to this work, and it allows us to quality assure provision at all stages of a graduated response model. It intends to ensure consistent offers are available to all learners, whether in a school or a specialist teaching facility. And we've undertaken a significant amount of work with schools to develop the workforce to equip them to deliver the ALNET transformation, and that's included accredited training modules so that staff in schools have sufficient skills to identify and plan for meeting the needs of learners with additional learning needs. There's a continued focus for schools on quality assurance to ensure wherever possible we've got a consistent approach to ALN provision across Swansea. And this has included a specific focus on our universal and our enhanced provision, and we've produced guidance documents to support schools. We've undertaken moderation exercises to support staff to develop consistent quality of individual development plans, what we refer to as IDPs, across the local authority, as well as the development of provision maps to outline universal, targeted and specialist provision on offer across the local authority. And our moderation exercises have evidence that there's still some further work to be done, but it's given us a good idea of what we need to achieve. Engagement is really high, and there's good support in place for schools. So we've established closer links and training with the school improvement team, particularly in relation to ALN provision, and that's supported our school improvement advisors in their evaluation of effective school leadership in relation to ALN provision. In terms of our supporting sufficient specialist places programme, one of the most significant parts has been our STF review. So with support from the school funding and information team, we've delivered against the expected timelines for a phased implementation of our specialist teaching facility STF review between 2025 and 2028. So there's been a full statutory consultation that's been completed with a public consultation, post-consultation statutory notice, and a closure of the official objection period. So it was quite a significant consultation exercise. Meetings were held in the autumn term of 2024, and we had over 50 consultation meetings with around 160 total respondents. So every school where there was a significant change received a comprehensive suite of on-site consultation meetings. So we met with pupils, with parents, with staff and governors in every school that was significantly impacted. And we also had public meetings in person and online. And we consulted with our trade union colleagues. A report was submitted to Cabinet with the findings of the consultation period and with the recommendations for the future model. And no official objections were submitted. So March 25, Swansea Cabinet agreed to proceed with the proposals. So the detailed plans for each component have been worked up separately, and we've identified schools who are a priority for change for September 25, but it is a programme that will be rolled out over a 5-year period. So we have the plans in place for that. And the impact really of all of that work is that the likelihood of improving quality provision is high. We've got a new memorandum of understanding in development, and new and existing SDFs are going to be implemented afresh. So we've used our ALN capital grant effectively aligned to the STF review to make sure that we've got future-proof spaces in schools, and the newly proposed SDFs will have appropriate learning environments. So there's also an important part of our supporting sufficient specialist places programme, which is focused on some more innovative projects. And I'm going to let Hugh talk you through some of those elements now, because he's been leading on those.
Over to you, Hugh.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kate. So yeah, in terms of the cluster enhanced projects and the provision, they're part of the review. And we've got 2 innovative projects underway that are currently live. One is in Town Hill Primary School, which serves the Dylan Thomas cluster and works on a model where children from the cluster primary schools within that cluster come into Town Hill on a 2-term basis, and then staff go back out to schools the sending schools on the Friday to support those schools to develop their inclusive practice. The other project that we've had in readiness for our STF, Welsh Medium STF in September 2025, is a project that's run from Brynjago for Welsh Medium education, and pupils have been supported, a small group of pupils have been supported in readiness in a classroom with a teacher and a TA, and that's proved to be really useful and a really good testing ground in terms of where we go next with that. Positive feedback on both projects from schools and from parents. Some children notably making good progress, and parents really on board in terms of taking those provisions forward. So definitely food for thought. The pilot in Brynjago and within Townhill, the Townhill project will run for another financial year. I think we've agreed funding on that. And the Brynjago pilot will now run for the summer term in readiness for the opening of the STF in September 2025. That leads me on to talk about Welsh medium provision generally. So the proposal for the STF review to prioritise Welsh medium education has gone ahead and has been approved by Cabinet, and we're due to go live with that in September 2025. So we've been working with the school to put the important things at staff, get staff involved, get staff employed so that we're ready for opening in September 25. And it's been a really, really good opportunity to sort of look at Welsh medium education in terms of the cluster and how that works. So we'll be working on that moving forward. We will be supporting staff within the Brynjago resource in terms of their knowledge and specialisms. So central teams will be providing support to ensure that they're they feel suitably supported. And then Welsh medium places will also be extended into the secondary sector, and the next steps are to identify a physical base to offer the same support to primary learners within the Bryn Tawy cluster, because obviously we serve the Goy cluster at the moment, so we'll be looking to extend into the Bryn Tawy cluster next. To Kate.
Thank you. So I just share some further information in relation to our work around tribunals. It's the Additional Learning Needs and Education Tribunal Act, so that's why we've included this information. We are of the view that it's always something to be avoided, and in the 2 years from January 23, there have been 25 appeals to the Education Tribunal for Wales, and the number of appeals in Swansea is low compared to the rest of Wales and given the size of our authority. And of those appeals, only one was upheld, meaning that the majority were in the favour of the local authority. What this means is our success is significant, with a good record of recent outcomes favouring the local authority's provision. So what that tells us is that we have a good local offer, and that's the bit that's important to us about that we can offer the best opportunities for children within the locality of Swansea. We want to focus our resource and expertise on providing the very best education offer for local children as close to home as possible, and ideally in our own quality assured provision. So we do recognise it's not always possible, and working in partnership with families is a priority to avoid dispute wherever possible. And to support that, we've got a really effective caseworker team who work in partnerships with families to avoid disputes. Workforce succession planning has also been important as part of our strategy, particularly in relation to some of the critical areas of the workforce, for example, the education, psychology and specialist teacher teams, and we've had some good successes there. So post-16 is a further area of the strategy. So I'll provide a brief update on that. So one of the key areas for work for us to focus on from September 25 is that Welsh Government will devolve funding for post-16 places to local authorities. So to date, Swansea has been seen as a model of good practice in terms of the breadth of our post-16 offer. So it's likely that we will benefit from the new arrangements. However, we do recognise that we need to consider increasing costs against all independent placements and demand. So strengthening our offer, again, similarly in relation to the tribunals, is a priority for us. So we're working on post-16 guidance documents to explain options for post-16 ALN learners, as well as providing information, signposting and so on. provide information about further education, ALN courses, including independent living skills, as well as opportunities offered by the third sector. And we've got a positive collaboration between ourselves and Gower College, Swansea. So further strand of the strategy is around collaboration. This is a really important area for us, particularly in relation to our collaboration with our local health board colleagues. Recently, they've invited heads of service from both Swansea and Neath Talbot to sit on the local health board strategic board, which has been really helpful in terms of navigating the code and the Act and the implications for local authorities and health boards working together. So ALN officers continue to link with the health board to review the current speech and language service level agreement. Historically, we funded some work which should really fall within the health board statutory responsibility, but we also recognise that the health board have got huge challenges themselves. So it's about working in collaboration to make sure we get the best outcome for learners. So those closer links with the health board have been really beneficial, particularly in relation to occupational health services. And there's been a recent project supporting mainstream schools and a similar project in Neath Talbot. So we're getting some consistency across our region as well. We've had continued discussions with the health board and there's been a review of the referral process into the neurodevelopmental ND assessment pathway, which should have benefits both in terms of improved referral mechanisms and also in supporting the reduction in the waiting list. I sit on the regional autism strategy group, which is a group that works in partnership to consider solutions to provide pre-diagnosis support. And the group's got a key focus on both preventing to prevent both escalation to the waiting list and to reduce waiting times. And one of the things that we're very proud of is our joint venture between Swansea and Neath Talbot around myth busting, which is funded by the Regional Partnership Board and has made some good progress in achieving our aims. So Hugh's been the lead on this, so he'll talk you through the myth busting project.
Thanks, Kate. So the myth busting project aims to raise awareness and dispel common misconceptions about conditions like autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So it's been an initiative that's been collaborative between Neath Talbot and Swansea Council, between the inclusion teams involving specialist teachers and educational psychologists. And it was been, as Kate said, funded by the West Glamorgan Regional Partnership Board. First phase of the project included a digital platform, so an animation was produced that was embedded in the Swansea Council website, and printed resources were made available for schools and parents, providing sort of accurate information and breaking down myths about autism and how it can be supported in schools. And the short animation explains the support available at home, at school and in the community, regardless of whether a formal diagnosis has been received. So that was to move away to help with the misconceptions about the type of support that you could receive within school without a diagnosis. Clips from the animation are displayed electronically in the central bus station, car parks, and are shared via social media channels and have been really, really effective. The project intends to raise awareness about neurodevelopmental conditions. The target audience is parents and carers and the community. It advocates the needs-led approach to supporting neurodiversity in line with national thinking, and it's moved on. So we've had phase 2 of that as well, which has incorporated some podcasts, and phase 3 now will move to work with secondary age pupils and working also in there with post-16. So they're the next steps. On to 5.2, which is occupational therapy projects. So pleased to announce there have been 2 really exciting projects during the last year in relation to commissioning occupational therapy to support primary and secondary schools and specialist teaching facilities. And they've been highly successful within the short time that they've run and been well received by schools. So both projects were grant funded via ALN grant during 24-25, and then are expected to be extended beyond into the obviously this financial year. The first project, which was delivered by a sensory wellbeing occupational therapist, targeted specialist teaching staff and helped them to understand sensory processing, sensory dysregulation, and importantly, how to manage need. And this has been delivered via in-person sessions, which have been delivered within council buildings, and school staff have attended these events. The project has also supported us a small number of specialist teaching facility classes at a school-based level, and reports back from school are that they've been very well received and have been really effective in understanding the sensory needs of the learners placed there. The second project, which is with our partners in Swansea Bay University Health Board, focused on supporting mainstream schools, predominantly via online training. So we've covered zones of regulation and sensory circuits training. We've also provided some opportunity for schools to book on to consultation slots to discuss individual learners. And a pilot of 4 schools were included in a project just to I suppose, test the waters in terms of how that support could support a school-based level. And that's gone really well as well. So that's been really, really positive. We've provided guidance in relation to developmental coordination disorder and some practical advice on handwriting as well, which I think has been welcomed by schools. Okay, to early years.
Okay, thanks. So I'll just conclude by sharing the fourth part of the strategy, which is the work around early years. So the Act extended the responsibilities from 0 to 25. So the early years cohort's an important group for us. So that forms the fourth element of the strategy. So there's been a significant growth in the demand for ALN, supporting the early years cohort. Originally, our internal structure only included the statutory early years Elenco posts, so that was 1 officer. But it's become clear that due to the increasing demand, there's insufficient resource to effectively meet our obligations in relation to this cohort. So as a consequence, we've undertaken a review of our early years funding and processes, and a new model of delivery will be implemented from April 25 that will enhance the offer and ensure that we're better able to meet the increasing need to support children with additional learning needs in their early years settings, and then support the transition to school. So to date, there's continued support provided for early years settings, and that includes training, advice and information. And the training needs are identified through liaison with settings, and they're delivered flexibly to meet the needs of the settings, often in the evenings or out of work time. Specialist staff are available for regular question and answer sessions to support practitioners. We undertake moderation of early years IDPs to make sure there's consistency with the early years cohort through to the school cohort. And information sharing between schools and early years providers is developing, and we've got a real focus on transition. So the early years process pathways are regularly monitored to ensure they meet demand across the service. And we've just concluded a process where early years staff who are employed by commissioning and resources within social services will transfer to the ALN early years team in April 25. We tried to do that because we're anticipating it will provide a more joined up approach to supporting preschool children, so more cohesion around that. And we've grant funding's been identified and will provide some opportunities to strengthen the offer and implement a more proactive, preventative approach in line with the current offer. So this area of work is a really important focus for development in the next year, because we recognise that there's a lot of work to do here to meet the demand. So just to conclude then, if that's okay, in relation to the report that we've shared, so we think that there's good delivery in better provision to support schools with learners experiencing barriers to learning. We think that we've got improved planning and delivery of support for learners in the 0 to 25 age range, and the Act is embedding well. Early identification of needs and putting in place timely and effective interventions has progressed well, with schools developing more inclusive practice. So, for example, ASD friendly and early and embedded speech and language and communication strategies. However, despite the progression of the strategy, there are still some challenges in relation to demand and funding and capacity. And while our tribunal outcomes are favourable, nationally, they reflect an interpretation of the legislation which is operationally quite challenging to deliver. So we retain absolutely a commitment to child-centred approaches and high-quality local authority maintained offers to meet the needs of children, and we attribute our tribunal defence to that ethos, alongside a commitment to working in partnership with parents and carers. However, we have to highlight that there is a tension between policy and practice, and it's becoming increasingly challenging. So we are aware that the Welsh Government is actively reviewing the implementation of the Additional Learning Needs and Education Tribunal Act, and our officers have actively contributed to that review to highlight some of those challenges, and the most significant one being the underfunding of the statutory obligations and that tension between policy and practice.
Great. I'm going to say thank you very much to Kate and to Hugh. An awful lot of work has gone in there, really a lot of work, and I know there'll be some questions, and I can see Robert has got his hand up because he wants to make a contribution. Robert Smith.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I can thank all the officers this afternoon for presenting what I think has been a very comprehensive overview of the changes in provision. What's been outlined is the changes in the way we provide the delivery models, changes in ways of working, changes in how we deliver support for children and young people. As Kate has alluded at the end there, I think there are very high expectations, and I think it's a tribute to practitioners across the board that we've been able to achieve what we have been able to achieve. And I think that's a tribute to them and a tribute to the support they've been having from the authorities centrally. That's not to say that I think there are huge demands on the service. The expectation, the predictions are that demands will increase further in future, and I think there needs to be a serious conversation, not just in Wales but across the UK. I think in terms of how we meet this demand and how we make sure that the resources that are allocated to it are sufficient. We'll do all we can at a local level, but I think that needs to be part of a much broader discussion, and perhaps we can have that at another date, Chair. But certainly, I think the work that's been achieved locally is impressive, and I pay tribute to all involved.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Mike Day. Mike.
Thank you. And yeah, just like to follow on from Robert's comments, really. I think it's a great report, and it reflects a wonderful way of dealing with the process of change, which is always difficult, isn't it? And the outcome, I think, is one which, as they say, is the proof is in the pudding, because you didn't have any objections to formal objections to what was being proposed. I think what is heartening is the relationship with social services and the health board and education, and being able to provide an integrated support mechanisms for these youngsters and families really who are affected by these neurodiverse issues that have been covered. I think just a couple of questions and comments following on from that. I think we all recognise that early intervention is essential, and whilst I commented on the health board's involvement, I wondered how far the health board are involved in that. And I noted in the report that you're engaged with a number of the independent providers for pre-3-year-old provision, and being able to kind of transfer into the school situation. So I think that's something which is fairly important. So just wanted to find out a little bit about that. If I may, Chair, I'd like to just talk about a couple of other issues, and maybe you can come back on the different points. Would you prefer me to cover them all, and then, or would you like me to stop now and then come back with the others?
I think come back with the others would be easier. Yeah, thanks. If you'd like to kick off. Thank you, Mike.
Do you want me to start? Yeah, so the question around the interface with the health board and support for the early years cohort. So I think it's fair to say that it's developing. All of our work in relation to the health board is very much under development. There's some strong links in relation to children who have the more complex medical and physical needs, and those are quite well established processes. But for the broader early years cohort, I think that's an important focus for us in the year ahead as we develop that early years team and really think about how we can best support children to be well supported in the early years in terms of that scaffolding and prevention, but also transitioning into school. So a developing model, I think, is the best way to describe it.
Great, thanks, Mike. Do you want to
Thank
come
you.
back
Yeah,
on that and on to your
Yeah,
next
thank
one?
you. No, that's good, and that's heartening to hear. Yes, thinking in terms of provision going forward, I noted there was a reference there to trying to reduce our reliance on out-of-county placements. I wondered, how many youngsters we currently have placed out of county, because we know that those are very expensive provisions and can take resource away. But if we don't have the facilities, then that's going to be important. I know that there's been efforts to shift the emphasis, hasn't there, in terms of providing facilities locally wherever possible, and how whether that number is actually reducing or increasing. The second point then in terms of provision was that from my perspective, I tend to like to see things visually, and I wondered if there was a map of the provision for STFs across the county, which shows the existing provision and the nature of that provision, plus then what is being proposed. Because I know that there are a significant number of changes. We've had the tables in the cabinet reports and in the consultation documents which show where the changes are taking place, but it'd be useful if we could have that. I mean, not necessarily today, but it would be useful for us at some point to be able to see that. And just want to sort of final comment really, and I hope I'm not stepping out of a line in one sense, but I recognise the comment that Robert's made about the increasing demand, and I think everybody would be wanting to, as far as possible, future-proof our provision. And so, from that perspective, is there anything that we can do as a scrutiny committee, as a scrutiny panel, to support the department and to be able to help them in being able to identify the resources that would be needed to ensure that we are able to meet this increasing demand, which seems to be just going, as somebody mentioned, exponentially at the moment. But all in all, I think just like to thank officers, and also I know that Robert's mentioned that as well, but it also comes back down to leadership, doesn't it, at cabinet and directorate level. So certainly from my point of view, thank you for your leadership in those important areas.
Great, fine, thanks. Kate?
So thanks for the question. So in terms of independent out-of-county placements, the numbers do fluctuate, but we're around 50 learners at the moment. And in terms of your question as to whether or not that was increasing or decreasing, it's stabilised. But I think what's important to note about that is that it's stabilised in an increasing demand situation. So the numbers haven't gone up. What we're doing is we're able to offer more local offers and more local authority maintained offers to our learners now. So those learners who we've already placed, we wouldn't want to displace them. We'd want to see them through their education. But we're not seeing the same level of demand for those places now, because we think we have better offers in county in our local provision.
Fine, thank you. Could Adam in the room? Adam, if you'd like to come in next, and then Helen.
Thank you for that very comprehensive and positive report. I've just got two questions, if I'll just quickly ask them. In the section about post-16, it says you've got a very positive working relationship with Gower College, Swansea. I was just wondering if that extended to the sixth form sort of colleges, and that what's going on in Swansea is also being offered to the sixth form colleges, and if there's any sort of overlap there. And then on the myth busting, very positive to hear that the resources are being shared publicly and on social media and things. Obviously, there'll be overlap between people who are in the education department who have additional learning needs and other departments. Are these instances of like best practice being shared with other departments within the local authority, just to make sure that where there's overlap of people getting services, that everybody's on the same page? That's all. Thank you.
Great, fine, thank you.
Yeah, so just in terms of the post-16 offer, just to say firstly, our links with Gower College have always been pretty good. So in supporting learners that leave year 11 and then go to Gower College in terms of transition. But I think we are in that period where we're developing what the support will look like, obviously, once they move, particularly for learners with sensory needs, so deaf learners or learners with visual impairment. The offer for sixth form would be exactly the same. And historically, even under the SEN Code of Practice, we supported learners within year 12 and 13 if they needed the support. What we do find with quite a lot of learners that go to sixth form, by the time they get there, sometimes their needs are such that they don't require that support or don't want it. And I think that's important in terms of pupil voice. So, but we will provide that support to sixth form learners should they need it.
Great, fine.
On the myth busting, I don't know if Kate can offer anything, but I think we are linking with partners in child and family services. I think Julie Davis is one of the nominated leads, isn't she? So
yeah, so the work is overseen by the Regional Partnership Board, and the Regional Partnership Board has got multi-agency representation. So social services, third sector, health are all got oversight of that myth busting project. So although it's been led by education, it's very much shared and seen with other partners. So I just wanted to pick up on the maps as well. Sorry if that's okay.
Yeah,
please, yeah. I've got the maps. You probably don't want to share them now because of time, but I can send them by email or show them on the screen, whatever.
Yeah, do you want to send them out to members of the
Certainly,
committee? Because I think of the panel, I think people who aren't here today would be keen to see them.
Yeah, I'll circulate them by Michelle.
Thank you, and thanks Hugh for that comprehensive answer. Helen.
Thanks. I'm aware Councillor McGettrick was before me. He's been waiting patiently with his hand up.
Beg your pardon, James.
I just assumed Helen was coming back on a point. So if you need to come back on the discussion already, Helen, please go for it.
Okay, I'll come back in terms of Councillor Day's offer, in terms of what Scrutiny can continue to do to support this agenda. I think it's really important that this committee keeps it on its work programme, at least on an annual basis. Officers across the department, specifically working on ALN, have been very good at horizon scanning to date. They've been able to mitigate risks and deal with issues before they arise, but it is vast, and consideration of that demand is something that we will have to do continually, and aligning our resources both from a financial perspective and a human perspective in terms of the right officers to deal with all these matters is always going to be an ongoing consideration for us. So I'd welcome that Scrutiny keeps this in the forefront of their minds.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, that's something that we certainly would do. James. And
just to echo the other councillors, thank you for the report. There's kind of three areas. Maybe again, a bit like Mike, it might be best to take them one at a time just to avoid confusion that I wanted to query. The first one, or get a bit of elaboration on it. The first one was sort of section 3.1, where you're mentioning the sort of the IDP and the moderation exercises showing some inconsistency and saying that there's work that needs to be done. I mean, I guess probably none of us are shocked that some work needs to be done, but is it possible just to highlight what the remaining barriers are, or what the next sort of layer of work that you think's needed just to move that consistency on? I'm guessing some of it will be things like geography, is it? But without putting too many words into your mouth, just wondering what you felt the gaps were, what the barriers are.
Thank you. I think in relation to the moderation of IDPs, firstly, just to say that the schools have been really, really well supported to develop those IDPs. But I suppose in terms of the inconsistencies, it's the ongoing support for ALNCOs who are under significant workload pressure, I think it's fair to say, in terms of pulling those IDPs together and working on the right outcomes and understanding what that means. We invested quite heavily in terms of person-centered review processes, from about 10 years ago or so. So ALNCOs understand what that is in terms of providing the right outcomes to take learners forward, but sometimes there's a need to tighten up on some of the outcomes to make them more measurable. But also, one of the questions that we are asked about a little bit is in terms of what that support should look like in school. So we are continually supporting our schools to understand what inclusive learning provision should look like. And how that can support learners on a daily basis. So they're two of the things that we continue to push forward with. But we open an open door policy. So if any ALNCOs do need support, we can provide that support in quite a quick way.
Great, thank you. James, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, no, that's great. It's just for my understanding, and I did have a couple more questions. Again, great to see the collaborations going on. It's brilliant where we can make those sorts of connections. The pilot project in section 5 that's mentioned, I presume, is the one that Hugh outlined and is mentioned in section 5.2. Regards the pediatric occupational health in conjunction with the health board. Now, that highlights in the report that this is an area that Welsh Government has said is working really well in Neathport Talbot. So just wondering, obviously there's been a pilot project here involving a relatively small, was it 4 schools, I think? If that's viewed as being really successful in Neathport Talbot, what's maybe stopping that being more widely rolled out? Why is it sort of maybe at the scale of a pilot study still? Or pilot project, sorry, still.
Yep. So the good news is we will be taking it forward. I think what we came to the conclusion with last year was that we had a relatively short time scale. So I think we started on the project in the autumn term. By the time we'd recruited occupational therapists, they were in post by around November, December. And then so we had about 3 months to kind of test the waters, if you like. That's why we chose 4 schools. But we do have some feedback. So the training was very well received. The consultation visits have been very well received. The pilot projects, some of them were more successful than others, and that was interesting to look at why that was. So that will help us to think about how we roll that out moving forward. But we've just liaised with the head of occupational therapy at Swansea Bay University Health Board to ask her to go out for for potentially up to 2 occupational therapists, or a mixture of occupational therapist and an occupational therapy assistant or technician, so that the plan is for this financial year to support more mainstream schools and in a more meaningful way in some ways, getting out to schools and getting into the classes and helping ALNCOs and teachers within schools help in the day-to-day running of the school.
Great, thank you. James, do you want?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really good to hear, and it's also good to hear that we're learning from other local authorities' experiences as well. So, thank you very much for that. And then one final one. I won't labour after this. It was in section 5, just where you're talking about the statutory obligation on the health board now, that the funding implications gone on to the health board now. But that, for I presume very good practical reasons, that's something that we as a local authority are looking to continue funding. I believe it was speech and language therapy was the specific case that was mentioned. This is just for my understanding, realistically, obviously we want to maintain provision for those learners we have in need, but are there sort of long-term implications, particularly say around finances? Several people have mentioned resources are under pressure, and I think we all understand that. Just to understand what we're talking about, sort of what are the implications of doing this, and how long is it sort of likely to continue for, those sorts of things?
Hugh and I just arguing over who's going to answer. So we'll do a double act. Yeah, I'll start and then Hugh will tell me if I've got it wrong. So no, I think the challenge has always been that some elements that should be funded by health have been funded by the local authority because of the challenges in the local health board, and we recognise that, and rather than getting into you know, kind of divisive situations, what we want to do is work in partnership and try and resolve those issues collectively. However, I think the fundamental point is that there isn't sufficient funding to resource either in the health board or in the local authority the statutory requirements of the Act, and that's the ongoing challenge and battle that we have. And what's really beneficial about being part of the ALN, the Health Board's ALN Strategic Board, and then being part of our Strategic Board, is that we're able to escalate those concerns jointly rather than getting children and young people caught in the middle. So we find the right solution for the children, but then separately, strategically, we raise those cases, if that's sense.
Yeah, and just to come in, I think the intention of the code, wasn't it, was to outline any provision that would be available from school within section 2B of an IDP, and any provision that would be available from the local authority, from the local health board in 2C. So we're working closely with our designated clinical lead officer, who I must say we have excellent relationships with, to help move that forward. So we have regular meetings with health colleagues from speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, etc., just so that we can ensure that children receive the right support moving forward. But yeah, I think capacity is an issue, and something that we're always striving for.
Great, fine, thanks. James, do you want to come back, or is that?
No, it's that. Thank you very much to the officers. That's just clarified a few points for my benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Great. Well, could I thank Kate and Hugh? You know, that's great progress has really been made, and that didn't just happen. It happened because of a lot of hard work that's been put in. So that I kind of thank you and the team for that. So thank you very much. We now move on to an update on education other than at schools, and who's going to put their hands up to start that section off? I'm looking around. It's Kate. It's the Kate Phillips show. There we
Sorry
go.
about that.
Kate.
Sorry. Okay, so thank you. So I'll talk you through the report, and I will bring my colleague Sam in on part of it as well, and she'll share some elements with you. So the report is to outline the progress in relation to the agreed changes to Swansea Pupil Referral Unit, which we know as Maestero. The current PIU model was established in 2016. And we've reported to this panel previously that changing learner need has prompted a review, which was agreed to following a report to Swansea Cabinet in June 2023. And following the agreement to undertake that review, an extensive engagement and consultation process was undertaken. So this has been quite a long piece of work. And the new model, which was developed from that engagement activity, was approved by Swansea Cabinet in January 24. So at the time of the last report to the Education Scrutiny Performance Panel, this time last year, the consultation period in relation to the new model had just concluded, with agreement to begin implementation by September 24. So this report is detailing the progress. So it's important to share that background in terms of how we've got to where we are, because there's been quite a lot of work undertaken. So the new model, so the consultation period had led to the development of a set of agreed principles to underpin the new model. And they were as follows. I'll talk you through them. So we wanted to have a model that maximises the current resource available across the Vulnerable Learners Service to meet the needs of all learners requiring education other than at school EOTAS provision, and that identified the PIU's role within that. So we wanted the model to be one that will achieve better outcomes for all EOTAS learners across Swansea Council, and not just those attending the PIU. So it's about maximising our resource. We didn't expect the PRU to provide all of the above. However, we thought that the role needed to be more clearly identified in the continuum of support, and it may also contribute resource, whether that's physical, human resource, financial resource, to boost other EOTAS providers such as home tuition, with the aim of ensuring access to resources as equitable as possible for all EOTAS learners. So we also recognise there might be opportunities for other teams in the Vulnerable Learners Service to work differently with the PRU to support learners who are dual registered at the PRU better. So, for example, some of our children with additional learning needs. And we believe that achieving the above would in turn lead to the PRU functioning more as originally intended, which is a reintegration model with earlier intervention. We also wanted the model to work towards addressing the high levels of violence and aggression that were reported by staff at the PRU, and to provide opportunities to improve attendance, reduce exclusions, and to ensure that those learners who are on pastoral support plans receive a package of support which increases their time in education, although not necessarily time in Maisteru, but by offering something alternative. So in essence, we wanted to maximise what works well and address the challenges to make the improvements where needed. And the expectation was that all areas of the Vulnerable Learners Service would need to contribute, collaborate to achieving the above. We knew there was no additional funding or resource, but we thought there was an opportunity to use the funding and resource differently. So in order to help us achieve this operationally, the following proposals were made. So that the existing primary phase and halfway house would merge to form a single PRU that would operate on a reintegration model for learners in primary and lower secondary, so up to year 8. The provision for learners with social, emotional and mental health will remain, but operate on a more flexible, bespoke intervention model, allowing for earlier and more flexible bespoke packages to be developed, and some would be offered on an outreach basis. The provision for secondary learners would be merged to one provision, catering for year 8, 9 upwards, and operate again flexibly, bespoke intervention basis. There will be full-time places available, but we also want to encourage more bespoke multi-agency outreach packages as well. And the options available to the EOTAS panel will be expanded, and schools will be encouraged to refer earlier for preventative interventions to avoid escalation to longer term or full-time placements. So registration with Maisteru wouldn't necessarily be needed to access preventative interventions. And we also considered a special school spoke provision in the Maisteru building to cater for a small number of learners with long-term additional learning needs who require specialist teaching, but access to resources of the PRU. So quite a lot of intentions, and what we did notice that there will be learners midway through a course of study, and there's no intention to disrupt this. So the focus of the work to date has been on preparing for the new model and making those changes in anticipation, while ensuring that the current learners can continue as they are while the new model is phased in. So the first task was to review and implement a new staffing structure for September 24. So that staffing structure is now in place. And what we've got is a reduced but refocused leadership team, which allows for a more effective distribution of leadership responsibilities and also staff development opportunities. So there's a new head of centre and manager for EOTAS services sitting next to me, who's introduced herself, Sam Whitford, who's leading on the implementation of the new model. The support worker team has been restructured to provide a term time only model with revised job descriptions to better focus on improving learner outcomes. And the business support team has been restructured to better align with the wider Vulnerable Learners Service and provide a more cohesive approach to key business matters such as commissioning, budgeting and the effective use of resource. So all job descriptions have been revised across the PRU to ensure that the required flexibility is in place, and the changes have also ensured the PRU is more likely to be able to operate within the agreed budget. So there was a requirement, one of the most pressing needs was to review the EOTAS panel, and an interim review has taken place, and new panel chairs have been identified from across the Vulnerable Learners Service, which has increased capacity, resilience and offers different perspectives. Additional panel members have also been identified from across a range of agencies, and they attend regularly. And the panel are now recommending part-time placements to increase access, retain engagement at school level, and also to increase the potential for reintegration. So the new head of centres initiated a full review of panel processes as well, which is starting tomorrow, and that includes revising the terms of reference as a multi-agency review, and it's a really important step in revising the current offer and establishing clear expectations around the role of the PRU and expectations on both the settings and the referring organisation. So the next section is around our improvement action plan, which has been written by Sam as the new head of centre. So it's appropriate that she talks us through it.
Right, Sam, welcome.
Hi.
Over to you.
Okay, so our improvement action plan. So myself as the new head of centre has produced an improvement action plan to support implementation of the new model, and we're at the beginning of our journey. The plan is informed by the 8 principles agreed, which Kate has just gone through. During the consultation engagement period, and the senior leadership team and management committee have also contributed to the plan. The improvement plan is included in Appendix A to this report and outlines the steps needed this academic year to support the implementation to the new model, but also address some of the issues that necessitated change. The previous model was not meeting learners' needs sufficiently, and there were key challenges in relation to low attendance, high exclusions, and high levels of reported violence and aggression. The new model expects the PRU to be an example of best practice when supporting children with social, emotional and behavioural difficulties. The PRU should, in time, provide outreach support to schools with the intention that children remain in mainstream school where possible, but access support from the PRU if needed. The Improvement Action Plan has 4 strategic aims. They are to align the vision and remit to the functions of a PRU. So the rationale for this aim is to provide appropriate and targeted support for learners across the authority with identified needs. Specialised and experienced staff at MyStereo to be more effectively used across the local authority. Number 2, to achieve better outcomes for pupils, all AOTIS learners across Swansea Council, not just those attending MyStereo. The rationale for this aim is to develop a clear vision for progression for all learners receiving support from MyStereo, pupil progression to be bespoke and relevant to the individual, clear links to other AOTIS services to allow access to facilities and specialist staff. And apologies, there's a slight duplication there on number 3, but to review the wellbeing support for learners being supported at MyStereo. The rationale for this aim is a health and wellbeing is at the centre of the needs of all pupils who require support for MyStereo. Health and wellbeing is embedded in everything that we do, from whole centre culture, class planning and individual interventions that are preventative and reactive. This is done well to meet the needs of the pupils, but not clearly assessed, monitored and evaluated show progress. So the missing one there is to reduce the incidence of violence and aggression by pupils to peers and staff. So the rationale is that we had high levels of exclusions resulting from incidents of violence and aggression that were reported by staff through the submissions of HS3s to the local authority, so coming from pupils towards staff.
Thanks. So if I can just then share the progress to date. So it's really important to note that we're not yet 2 full academic terms into the transition to the new model, but there have already been some changes and improvements in the offer for learners and also in learners' experiences. So the improvements are detailed in the evaluation section of the improvement plan, which is on Appendix A, but I've just drawn out some key highlights for the panel. So improved communication with schools and clarity of expectation has meant that 9.8% more learners have reintegrated to schools now than compared to autumn 2023. There's improved collaboration between mainstream schools and the PRU in relation to learners with additional learning needs, with an increase in the number having a jointly written individual development plan between mainstream and MyStereo. The more flexible offers of support, including part-time places, mean that 141 pupils have received support from MyStereo in the autumn term 24 compared to 124 in autumn 23. So that's an increase of 13.7%. Grant investment has improved the offer for learners. So an example of that is we've got some electronic drums, DJ music studio has been installed, and pupils are learning to use new equipment to support learning in music and widen opportunities through music therapy. And in line with the expectation to work more effectively across the Vulnerable Learners Service, meetings have taken place with the Vulnerable Learners Service Commissioning Officer to establish a new EOTUS provider framework, which will offer more opportunities for learners in time. There have been a number of parental and community engagement opportunities, which have included an enterprise fair to showcase and develop pupils' creativity, practical and independent skills. Parental engagement was excellent at the event and developed an opportunity to deepen their knowledge and understanding of the qualification and curriculum. 4 support workers have been trained by the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service CAMS to enable Maesteru to refer pupils to CAMS specifically for mental health support, and that's the first time the PRU has been able to directly refer themselves. Strategies to improve engagement and respond to learners in a therapeutic and trauma-informed approach are having a positive impact. There's a decrease of 55% in fixed-term exclusions this term compared to autumn 23. There's a clear focus on planning and learner progression and improving the curriculum and qualifications offered to maximise opportunities for learners. So one example of this is for Year 5, so Step 2 and 3, language and literacy and communication, mathematics and numeracy. So the Media Academy Cymru developed a 6-week course which engaged learners in practical hands-on experiences to support cross-curricular learning, and consequently learner engagement in literacy and numeracy interventions is increasing, which is in turn having a positive impact on progress. So planning and responding to learners' needs is making a positive difference. For example, in Key Stage 4, the offer has changed from a 5-lesson to a 7-lesson model. So this adjustment allows more manageable lessons, and it better supports learners' needs by breaking down the content into smaller segments. And as a consequence of that, attendance has risen by 7.6% compared to the summer term. So a positive outcome. And there was a small cohort of children whose attendance at their mainstream school was 0 prior to referral, so they simply weren't attending, but they now have attendance of over 90%, and that can be attributed to their education and emotional needs being met within the PRU. So most significantly, I think one of the major concerns leading to the review of the PRU operating model was the reported instance of violence and aggression. So the intention was that the new model should better respond to learners' social and emotional and educational needs. And this term, there's been a 59% reduction in incidents of violence and aggression. And there's been a significant reduction in staff absence compared to spring 24, alongside the longer term reduction in exclusions. So we think that there's some real green shoots of improvement in relation to attendance. And this suggests overall the progress towards meeting the intended aims of the restructure is good, though still new.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks. Any questions? Could I say, I always like to see actions and progress, and I think the report you just given contains both. And you know, when you're talking about 55% decrease in fixed term exclusions, well, that's fantastic, because if they're not there, they're not learning. That is fantastic, and some of the other statistics. So I can see Mike has got his hand up, so you're not getting away entirely. But I have to say, you know, really well done to you both and the team. There we go, Mike.
Yeah, just again, thank you, and it's good to see that the changes are having an impact on the pupils. Just a couple of practical points, if I may. Could you remind us of the funding model, in the sense of does the funding follow the pupil, or you know, is there a sort of separate funding stream? And secondly, then, in terms of transport, is that an issue for pupils, you know, wanting to or needing to attend the PRU, and how is that provided for? And just by way of comment, I noticed in the strategic priority 1 improvement plan that there's an item there which says to increase the number of pupils receiving support from the PRU. Is there an estimate at the moment of the unmet demand? You know, what we talked about, 141 pupils receiving support from Maesteru in the autumn term. and I just wondered if how is that compared to what the estimate of the demand is for the service?
Sure. I'll start with the funding, and I'll cover a bit of transport, and then I'm sure Sam will pick up on anything that I've missed and can cover information on our waiting list effectively, which I think is the measure of the demand. So it's a core funded service. We do recharge schools, but effectively the local authority funds the PRU, and the recharge to schools at the moment is relatively low compared to the cost of the provision for children. So I hope that answers that question. In terms of the transport, we had to consider the transport model carefully in terms of reducing to offering a more bespoke packages and part-time places. Obviously, that does have an impact for transport for learners, and some of these children are very vulnerable and need that transport support. So there's a transport officer who works out of Maesteru, but in line with the principles around better collaboration. We've linked with our colleagues in the Place Directorate in the homeschool transport team, and we now have a joint funded post which looks at maximising that resource to make sure that we are using the transport as effectively as possible. So we've absolutely taken it into consideration, and we're working that through with our colleagues as the model develops. I'll let Sam pick up on the demand.
So yeah, we've talked about the increase in the number of pupils accessing the provision, and I think the key is that we're trying to reach more pupils and be less restrictive in what type of support we offer. So by offering potentially part-time places, we're essentially able to offer support to more young people quickly, rather than waiting on a pending list. The aim would be to reduce the pending list as quickly as we can, which we're trying to do. But it's not necessarily about unmet demand. That there's not necessarily places sitting there waiting. It's pupils that are maybe taking up full-time places that don't necessarily need that, and trying to increase the support that can be offered in mainstream schools, so we can offer to a wider reaching number of pupils. So there's not a sort of definite number. We're modelled at the moment for 158 places, full-time equivalent. So where we can offer part-time places, we can offer to multiple pupils at the same time. So we're just trying to increase that as much as we can. The figures and any data of number of pupils we're supporting at any one time and the number of pupils on pending list varies literally from day to day. It's all very bespoke, and the lives and the positions of these young people changes quite quickly. We've literally got young people that are moving in and out of county and different care placements as we speak. So we've got under 25 pupils currently on a pending list. That pending list does fluctuate and vary. So we've got a number of young people that are still waiting to access provision. They've been offered a place and they're not able to take it, or haven't attended meetings and things like that. So that kind of varies as the days goes on. But yeah, we're looking at strategies really to try and offer support as quickly as we can, and we've gone over numbers in some areas where the demand is higher. So obviously we've got different provisions with different types of learners and different types of age groups. So where we feel that the pending list is particularly higher, we're going over numbers to provide that where we can safely.
Great, thank you. Is that okay, Mike? Great. Councillor Robert Smith. Robert.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think Sam and Kate again have outlined the work that's going on there, and I think it is about meeting learners' needs, and in doing so, deploying the huge expertise. We've got an excellent resource in Maesteru, and we've got a huge reservoir of expertise there in meeting learners' needs. And as Sam has just said, I think it's the bespoke provision and how we can tailor provision to meet the needs of individual learners, whether they are full-time in Maesteru or whether it's some other package that's being delivered. So again, I think we would fully endorse what's been presented this afternoon, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions? I can't see any hands up and no hands in the room. Can I say thank you very much again? And as you know, the panel visited my stereo a little while ago, and it was really interesting to make that visit. So thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is a very important item, and that's hearing voices of children and young people. And who is going to? It's going to be Sarah. Right. Over to you, Sarah.
Lovely, thank you. So I'll go through some of the highlights of the report. There's a couple of sections that you will have seen before as a panel. I think it's the third time I've brought this report to the panel. But the work covers really not just the work of the Education Directorate, but the partnership involvement team based in the Social Services Directorate. And we work together closely to plan some of that work. We meet on a termly basis between the two teams to plan what's coming up ahead over the next sort of term at least, but also beyond that. And also they sort of have supported facilitating some events to some of our priorities, and I'll come on to that in a bit more detail now. So under the corporate plan, we do have specific references to learner voice, and for example, one of the strategies, the inclusion strategy, mentions that they will promote learner participation in decision making, so really is at the heart of what we do. So in the next section, under the Children's Rights and Human Rights City Schemes and the Pupil Manifesto, so we have reported on this previously. A big conversation event was held in February last year to revisit the original 7 priorities of children and young people in Swansea, and 6 renewed priorities were set for Swansea Council to address. So just taking us through those is protecting the environment, health and well-being, equality, safety, listening to learners, so they themselves highlighted its importance, and technology. So those sort of priorities are key things really that we need to consider as we plan and deliver our services. And then the Human Rights and Strategic Equality Plan 24 to 2028 took on board consultation undertaken in relation to equality and diversity issues to inform its objectives, which included engagement with children and young people in the 2 years prior to the development of that plan. And an action plan is now in place to deliver the objectives of the plan, with specific areas of focus that are discussed monthly under the Strategic Equality and Future Board. And the first annual review will be published in March 2026. So I think if this report comes back to the panel next year, we'll be able to include an annual update of the work that education has done through that plan as well. And again, in 2024, the secondary schools pupil voice professional learning community developed a new set of priorities for their next Swansea Pupil Voice Manifesto. A final draft of that manifesto has been prepared, with plans to present this to the Cabinet member in the coming weeks, with the hope that again it can be presented to full council before the end of the academic year. That's the plan. So the key themes identified in that manifesto, very similar to those 6 priorities, are feeling safe in our community, celebrating diversity and anti-racism, barriers to our learning, protecting the environment and minimising waste, mental health and emotional well-being, and accessibility. And each of those themes highlights specific school-based actions and broader community initiatives to improve the well-being and opportunities of learners in Swansea. So the next section then is around Universal Children's Day, and I've reported in previous years the events held in November 22 and 23, and the theme for this year's World Children's Day was Listen to the Future. So during the event, the Council celebrated 10 years of the Children's Rights Scheme, highlighting the work done over the last decade and set plans to go forward. A podcast was launched that included learners who were invited to take part in a previous big conversation around health and well-being. And as education, we presented to them as well in the form of You Said We Did, for the 7 priorities set by children and young people. So the things that they said was important to them, we said what we were doing about it and have done about it. And that was followed by an interactive marketplace with a number of local organisations as well. So the next section is around school councils and beyond. So there's no change really to the previous year's report. That work is well established and embedded. The next section is around the partnership and involvement team. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we meet on a termly basis. They also attended our senior leadership team meeting to talk about children and young people's priorities to ensure that our senior managers are considering those priorities as part of the planning and delivery of their services. And since 2014, they have facilitated the big conversation mechanism to involve children and young people aged 5 to 25 years old, so a wide range of ages, for them to engage in accessible and meaningful sessions to shape services. And I think we've highlighted in previous panel meetings around listening to quiet voices. So they do quite often use I was going to say, I can't think of the word, but sort of different sort of props really and mechanisms to gather the voices, and maybe putting counters in a cup or drawing pictures or participating in activities. That doesn't necessarily just mean the loudest voices sharing their views. So they do consider a sort of range of mechanisms really to get people's, so children and young people's feedback. So there's been 3 big conversations since last year with the themes around health and well-being. And that focused on school dinners, breathwork, play, healthy relationships, mental health, and the council's disability strategy. There was an intergenerational event that brought children, young people and adults together. And that was looking at challenges around stereotyping and creating spaces that were for everyone. And the next one was around new chapters, and that looked at transitions in our lives, considering tools and techniques for dealing with change in our lives. So the partnership and involvement team also do work throughout the summer holidays, and they had 6 city chill events in the city centre in partnership with community organisation and council teams. And the aim was to signpost community members to partners and organisations, and providing a space for young children and young people to come and take part in free activities. They also held a new event called Afternoon Teens, and that was a partnership between Evolve and their team, where young people from the 5 youth clubs invited community members into their space for afternoon tea, and a big celebration held at the end of the project. And then they also utilised funding to support with holiday food hampers, activity packs, and providing children with additional learning needs to take part in activities that are usually inaccessible to them. So the next section is around learner voice in schools, quality assurance and monitoring. And again, we've reported on the sort of general work around that previously, but to highlight in terms of the Estin reports published since April 2024 to March 2025, so 26 March 2025 when this report was finalised. 6 primary schools and 2 secondary schools had specific references to pupil voice in them. And nearly all of those reports provided positive examples of positive impact of including learner voice in their work. And there are some examples in the report. So the next section is the Education Directorate and what work we specifically do as a directorate. The work of the Additional Learning Needs and Inclusion team are providing direct support to children and their families, and person-centred approaches are central to this work, and children's views and voices are part of that decision making. So Kate has given earlier around the update around the STF review, and that ensured that the views of learners were captured as part of that consultation, and that was done in a way that was suitable for them and bespoke. And this included an easy to read pupil consultation paper that was also made available in British Sign Language. As part of the development of a new policy for supporting positive behaviour in schools, so that policy some of you will be aware of, learners were able to give feedback on topics around respect, rights and responsibilities in a big conversation event, and the feedback from that directly informed the development of that policy. And then the 3-year post-16 strategy, again, that's something that we've brought to panel both on its own, but as part of our education annual report. That's now in its final year of delivery. And we did have a survey for post-16 learners at the early stages of that strategy to inform the planning. That's now going to be succeeded this autumn by a new designing destination strategy. And again, ensuring that the sort of aims of learners and the needs are put in that new strategy. So in March this year, young people in Swansea played a key role in It's Your Swansea event in Swansea Arena, where they attended to gain insight into the future of the city. So again, that's related to design and destinations. And through their involvement in the use of learner voice and career choices, they contributed useful feedback that will guide the direction of the event in future. Okay, so moving on to our support for schools to develop as an anti-racist learning organisations. The voice of those with lived experiences has been considered to be central to developing that practice. As an example of that, 10 schools have participated in an in-depth action research project led by a field expert. And those schools have and will continue to involve learners in different ways to shape their anti-racist action plans. The next section, part of the recommissioning of the school's counselling service, a series of learner workshops were held to understand the views around emotional health and well-being. So all school key stages representatives and their needs will form the foundation. I say will form, it has formed the foundation of the procurement framework. And a new model of school-based counselling through platform is now operational, with the aim of providing learners with an offer more in line with emotional health and psychological well-being approaches. So a new accessibility strategy this year has just been approved by Cabinet in October, and as part of the development of that strategy, disabled learners shared their views through either digital means independently or with support from their ALNCO. And a wider consultation took place prior to the approval of that strategy too. And that strategy will provide us foundation for schools to build their own individual setting accessibility plans. And then the last one here, a personal education plan is written and developed in schools for all children who are looked after. This forms part of their wider care and support plan and focus on their view of education and how they would like to be supported. And that isn't discussed in their wider reviews. So in terms of future work streams and what the next steps for us are, is that as education officers, we will continue to work in partnership with the partnership and involvement team. We'll continue to meet on a regular basis and plan together and take that forwards. We'll ensure that the 6 priorities of children and young people and the new Swansea Pupil Voice Manifesto will be considered when we're planning and delivering our services. We will continue to deliver opportunities for learner voice as part of the development of the new design and destination strategy. We will continue to review and respond to feedback from children and young people through the big conversation events, but also other learner engagement opportunities. The school improvement team will continue to listen to learners as part of schools' quality assurance and monitoring. And another sort of work stream is to consider further opportunities using digital mechanisms and again, potential around how we capture all voices through all different means, really. So that's the end of the report.
Great, fine. Thank you very much. Really important work, and really interesting report. I can see Robert with his hand up. Robert.
Yeah, as in the other people, the previous items, I'd like to thank Sarah for taking us through what is a very comprehensive report. I think it shows the very broad range of activities that are going on across the council to ensure that the voices of children and young people are heard and they are at the heart of what we as a council do. And I think it is something that we're taking seriously. It's something we need to take seriously. And I think the report shows that. And not to say that everything is in place or that everything is already being done, but I think it shows that the progress has been made and the fact that this is something that we want to build on what's already been achieved, Chair. So again, thanks, Sarah, for the contribution this afternoon.
Thank you, Robert. Helen.
Yeah, just wanted to echo Councillor Smith's words in terms of how Sarah's crystallised the breadth of activity, and it's activity that counts not when it has to, but also in relation to how we capture it routinely in order to plan our services better. And I think that's significant for us in education, that we do take stock of learner voice. Not just through statutory consultations. An example is that we're consulting on the amalgamation of two schools currently. Of course, learner voice will form part of our consideration around that proposal, but it's also the wider platform we afford. 3 years ago, there was a platform made available. Attending a whole council meeting is a huge thing for our secondary school PLC, professional learning community, or whatever the term is, for their school councillors coming together as a learning community and being afforded that platform to go to full council. That was a terrific opportunity, and hopefully we can replicate that again this year.
Great, thank you, Helen. No, I hope so too, because interestingly, one of the people who took part in the last launching that manifesto, he was actually speaking. I was delighted to be asked to give him a reference. He's been finishing his education in Armenia, and he's now moving out to America, and it all started in Swansea, and I think that is really, really good. I think it's important. We all have a duty to make sure that voices, young people's voices are heard. I certainly do in the work that I do with the council, and in my own particular ward, where I've done projects with the comprehensive school, where we've done flag raising, which the school council came up with, and we do different subject areas. It's all sorts of things, and it really is interesting, and they never disappoint. They'll always come up with something, and I know that Councillor Sam Pritchard and I took part in a big conversation with a group of young children, and they weren't talking, and then we thought, well, I know, we'll talk about pets. So I do cats and Sam did dogs, and I tell you what, we ran over time. In fact, we were late for the next session. We just got them, and then they talked about everything because they had that confidence. So I think it is really important that we're doing that. Any questions from anyone? No, but just to say thank you. That is really important work, because it's something that we not just need to do. We've got to demonstrate we're doing it, but actually practically doing it as well. So really, really well done. Thank you. And finally on the agenda, we've got the work programme. In the one published, Michelle is always looking ahead. Obviously we've got a meeting in May, and that's already on the agenda. But what she was suggesting was the one for June, because obviously and July, if you could agree that today. Obviously, because they've got to be set up, and in particular the one in July, it's been suggested by one of the panel members that we actually visit Morriston Secondary School. So that needs to obviously be organised, and if I can I have your agreement? Yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much, and that comes to the end of our meeting. Can I thank you all, and in particular the officers, and Robert, the cabinet member. I'm very pleased he's really well again. That's good news. But thank the officers for coming in, giving of your time. Obviously, it takes time to prepare the reports, and but it's great to actually put out there the successes that are going on as well. So really well done, and thank you all, and see you soon.